Welcome agents, today I want to talk to you about a tweet from Julian Gerighty asking if we'd want a single player spin-off of The Division. I also want to give some raid feedback in preparation for the Foundry, the next raid coming with episode 2. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button below, subscribe for dedicated Division content and turn on notifications to never miss a video. With that said, let's get into the video. Okay, so first up, and there is currently a raid survey on Reddit where the devs are requesting feedback on Operation Dark Hours. I'll leave a link to it down below if you want to go check it out. I believe it's about 62 or 64 questions long. It's quite long and comprehensive. Now, I thought this would be a good opportunity to discuss the raid and provide my own feedback, but also encourage you guys to get involved in the comments and by doing the survey yourself. Now, when the raid released, I streamed it here on YouTube for about 3 hours or so, and I couldn't get past Boomer, the first boss. Now, the raid was completed in about 5 hours of launch on PC. I think it was by Marco Styles Clan POG. And I think it took something like 36 hours on console for the first time. Now, as of right now, PC have the time down to about 12 minutes. Sort of a speed run, and console have it down to about 24 minutes, I believe. But what are the good and bad things about the raid? You know, doing it quickly, is that a good or a bad thing? We're going to have a look at those. Now, firstly, the raid was clearly tuned for PC and not console. Now, a lot of encounters required precise aim on target with a small hitbox, meaning it was far easier on PC than it was on consoles. Take, for example, Boomer and his chest piece. We've got Razorback, and a lot of the encounters required that pinpoint accuracy that only on PC really were you able to perform it to a very good standard. Console was a lot harder. Now, the devs have already confirmed this won't be present in the Foundry, which is the next raid coming with episode 2, and instead it will focus on team-based mechanics and less so about hitting a target. Now, secondly, team-based mechanics. Now, when I first played the raid and got stuck on Boomer, there were monitors to watch and laptops and miniguns and force fields, and I was overwhelmed, but it wasn't in a bad way. It was exciting. I like the idea of these mechanics being in place. But I came to realise that actually you can pretty much ignore this stuff with most encounters. The encounters don't force you to follow the mechanics. They're there, but you don't certainly with Boomer, you don't really have to even use them. Now, take Destiny, for example. Generally, if you don't follow the mechanics in a particular order in a certain time, then you get team wiped. Now, that doesn't exist here, so more often than not, you can just simply ignore most mechanics and still be absolutely fine, which I don't think is a good thing. I think there needs to be a system where those team-based mechanics are important and you must follow those mechanics almost to a T. Otherwise, you get team wiped or you simply can't do it. Now, thirdly, the raid currently is just a DPS check, right? Now, I've seen people run through the raid with skill builds, but let's be honest, the best and most efficient way to beat the raid is to have the highest amount of damage with some talents that give you armor back, like Patience, for example. In the Buddy and Lucy encounter, you don't really have to leave cover at all, meaning you can actually put down so much damage and restore armor at the same time. The next raid needs to have encounters that are not just about doing as much damage as possible. Yeah, you should have to do damage, and you should have to do a lot of damage, but there should be some instances where that's not always the case, or instances where actually having a healer build or something else is required to get the best result. Overall, the raid just needs to be tuned away from the whole DPS check and just offer a little bit more variety. And moving on to number 4, exotics and RNG. Now, the raid has only one exotic to get, and that's the Eagle Bearer, and the chance of getting this weapon is very, very low. Also, the raid only guarantees 4 keys upon completion, and yet the chest at the end requires 5 keys, meaning you either have to run it more than once or be lucky enough that the 5th key drops from Razorback. Why does the raid punish players so much for doing a good thing? I just don't understand that. If you go back to the Division, Legendary missions guaranteed 1 exotic per week, so why in the Division tier are we punished with such low RNG and frankly insulting key drops in the raid? I think the main issue is that the exotic loot pool is so low at the moment, which is why the devs probably decided to have the Eagle Bearer drop with such low frequency to encourage the grind. But what the devs seem to be missing is we want to be rewarded with the time we put in and get loot, ultimately. Now, again, I'm going to use another Destiny example here, but it's important. Recently, the Menagerie was introduced. It's a 6-player mini-raid-like experience that guaranteed a piece of gear at the end from a chest. Now, you would charge a chalice with ruins, and dependent on the combinations of the ruins you entered, you would get something different in that chest. Well, Once you completed this menagerie or the activity, there would be a 240-second time before going to orbit. So people quickly realised that once they had got their gear out of the chest, they had 240 seconds to do nothing. They could just run out of the area, charge their chalice, run back into the chest room, and open the chest again. Now this could be repeated as many times as you could until the time ran out. And it was awesome, and the reason why it was awesome is because every time you did it, you had a chance of getting a better roll. You want to get that god roll. Destiny doesn't have stats like the Division does, but what it does have is rolls, and you want to get the best roll possible. So people were doing this to get the god roll of whatever weapon they wanted. It was awesome. Now Bungie decided recently that this was not intentional, and this was actually patched. Let's just say that the Menagerie is a ghost town now. Why? Because people want loot. People want the best loot, and they want a chance at getting that loot, farming it over and over again for that perfect roll. And with the Division, we want the perfect roll with the highest damage. This was the most efficient farming method in Destiny, and now it's gone, so people just aren't doing it anymore. Now, I'm not saying we need something similar, but what I am saying is we want loot, and we want the opportunity to get as much loot as possible, because with RNG in the game being so awful, you're going to need to run it 20,000 times before you get a high damage god roll piece of gear, and that's what people want to do. And as it stands, people aren't doing that with the raid. I'd recommend having like 4 to 6 raid exclusive weapons, maybe 3 to 4 exotics, and then you also want some raid gear as well on top of that. Guarantee some at the end of every run or at the end of every stage, whether it be like a guaranteed piece of gear or whatever it might be. Because at the end of the day, even if you get a guaranteed piece of gear, the chances of it being a god roll and having good stats is very low. So why not just guarantee it at the end of every go, and that way people will farm it, because every opportunity they get, they might have an opportunity to get a better roll. Now I like the keys idea that they had in Dark Hours, but I just don't understand why they'd only give you 4 keys and not 5. I think you should always get enough keys that at the end of every run you can open the chest with the chance of getting one of 6 or 4 exotics. The raid offers, in my opinion, the current raid offers no replayability as it stands, and I think this does need to change for future raids with the next one, the Foundry. So moving on to number 5, and I think they need to drop the 8-player requirement. Now this might be controversial, but I really think it pushed 98% of the audience, maybe more, away from experience in the raid. Yes, in TU5 we're getting matchmaking for the Discovery version of the raid, but I still think 8 players is too much. I think a maximum of 6 players is fine. I think adding the matchmaking is a great idea, but if the devs don't offer the Eagle Bearer or something significant from the Discovery version, which I don't think they should. I don't think they should be offering the Eagle Bearer here. I really don't think many people are going to bother with it, because the incentive to play the raid is the Eagle Bearer. There's really nothing else to get apart from the gear, which, as I've said before, no one is talking about, so I assume it's not very good. Now remove that, and what's the point? Yeah, players will get an opportunity to play the raid via matchmaking so they can learn the mechanics, but when they want to actually go and try the real thing, there's no matchmaking. So they're kind of back to square one. People aren't playing because they don't know how to do the raid. It's because they can't get 7 other people to play with. Now I really think the devs need to consider adding matchmaking to the main raid for Dark Hours and any future raids. I never quite understood the argument that there shouldn't be matchmaking, because ultimately people who decide to matchmake and not use an external LFG site, know what they're getting into. They know that the chances of them getting a good squad is probably quite small. But from my experience of using matchmaking or even an LFG type thing, which to be fair, LFG type system is pretty much the same as matchmaking, even that type of system I've had great experiences from. Yeah, I've had my odd ones off, but generally if you want to play the raid, then that's and you don't have the people to get, then this should be there. I really think that some LFG type system should be implemented into the game for all future activities, including raids, as promised, because this is what they promised when they talked about raids, when they were doing the E3 reveals and talking about how what the game would have and this and that, and they removed it, and I don't see why. Number 6, and let's remove the damage cap on bosses. Now, I didn't know this until recently, but Boomer and Razorback have a damage cap ensuring players cannot beat the bosses too quick. Now this has to be removed full stop. There's no argument here. How is this allowed to be? So the devs only give you 4 keys, but the chest at the end of the raid requires 5. The RNG is ridiculously low for 1 exotic, and then they cap the speed in which you can complete the raid. Like, do they seriously not want players to get anything for their time invested? To me, this is just a big 2 fingers to anyone who wants to speed run the raid. And I just don't see the reason why. If any of the devs are watching this video, Frederick, I know you do sometimes, please can you ask the relevant department why they think this is a good idea? I'd really like to know, because I'm sitting here thinking, okay, you know, I'm trying to write down what could be beneficial from this, but honestly, I've got nothing. I'm stumped. Moving on to number 7, and I think the raid NPCs hit too hard, and they just have amazing accuracy. Now, sorry to go back to Destiny again, but I think they actually balance trash mob damage properly, and the Division needs to kind of take notes. It doesn't matter really how much armor you have. In the raid, you could have 150k or 300k. The NPCs can drop you in a second because their burst damage is so great. It's not like they do a lot of sustain. It's their burst damage. So their initial burst damage is 300k. So if you've got 150 or 300, it doesn't matter. You're getting dropped in a second, and I just don't think that's right. I mean, maybe if they change it so it was more maybe it was more sustained damage, that would make sense, because then anyone who had 150k would die a lot quicker than someone who had 300k. But because it's kind of burst damage, then really you don't see any benefit no matter what armor you have, really. Now, I just feel like in the raid as it is, I feel like you're just constantly in cover with no room to kind of free roam that much. I think it needs to be toned down for the next raid, or they need to change the way that NPCs deal damage in the raid, and it needs to be less. It needs to be less damage more often rather than more damage less often, because that's how I think it currently is. But yeah, I mean, these are the main problems in my opinion that I think need to be addressed for the next raid and any future raids. What I find promising about this raid, about Dark Hours, is that this is their first time for such a big activity, and for a first attempt, I actually think it was really, really good. There were some good mechanics that I think the devs need to double down on and ensure they can't sort of easily be bypassed. And overall, I won't say overall that I was happy with the raid, because when I go back on reflection, I think there's some glaring issues here, but I think they can easily be rectified. And as I said, for a first go, I think they did really well. Okay, so moving on to the next point of this video, and I want to talk about the idea of a single-player spin-off of The Division. Now, this started with a tweet from Tim Spencer, level director at TT Games, who said this: "I love the idea of a single-player narrative-driven spin-off of The Division, focusing on an agent trying to get home to their family after being sent to NYC or New York City during the Shade blackout from the fall of DC." Now, as you can see from Julian Gerighty, was included in this tweet and responded saying, "Thoughts?" ? Now, this wasn't the end of Tim Spencer's tweet. He went on to say, "None of the stories have explored what a Division agent sacrifices and what they go through mentally. When you think about it, it's a pretty dark, epic thing. There's huge opportunity to tell some incredible stories here." I have to agree here. I have to reciprocate everything Tim has said. I would personally love the idea of a single-player, narrative-driven Division experience, focusing on the turmoil of having to be ripped away from your family as a Shade agent, answering the call, not knowing what will happen to them. One of the main issues the Division has dealt with is balancing both the PvE and PvP aspect of the game. So having the PvP removed and a pure focus on a single-player narrative could be amazing. What do you guys think about that? Of course, I know there are going to be comments that say they need to work on this game first, and we got this problem and this needs to get fixed, which I totally agree with. But this is hypothetical, okay? This is something that we're not saying that this is going to replace what they're doing for the game now. This is just something that was posted. I thought it was interested. This would be interesting to talk about, and I just wanted to get your guys' feedback, because I think it could personally work. I think The Division has a really cool story, but I just don't think it's been executed all that well. So I think this could be really interesting. Anyway, I don't want to dwell on this for too long. I did just think about this. It was kind of interesting. I wanted to get your guys' opinion on it, because it's a possibility that this could be a reality one day, and I hope so. I love PvP, as you guys know, but I really think The Division would work well with this. I would like the Last of Us type Division storytelling. I think that would be really, really cool. Anyway, guys, that's it for today's video. Hopefully you did enjoy this one. On Wednesday, we've got State of the Game, so please stay tuned for that. I'll have a video up around 6-7 o'clock UK or GMT time, so make sure you've got notifications turned on for that one. I'm hoping to hear a lot more information about maybe what's coming to TU5, or it's probably what we're going to be getting further on down the line with maybe TU6 and that sort of thing, so I'm looking forward to that. Thanks very much if you stuck out to the end. Thanks for all your support, and until the next one, Epic out.